What is up, guys? It's Jimbo here, and welcome to my first proper endgame build. And this is to do with the Lightning Storm Druid, or what I call God of Thunder version 1, because I'm still working on the build to get the specific stats and maybe swap around some of the passives, maybe. But yeah, what you're seeing on screen behind me is me in a tier 27 dungeon. I'm roughly around about level 72, 73 at the moment, so it's not pushing just yet. I'll do an update on this when I get even further into the nightmare tiers, but let's jump into the build and talk about all of the good stuff, the skills, the aspects, and all that stuff that you need to know about it. The first important thing to note about this build is that it requires no uniques to work. There's a few different aspects that you can get, but that's the same as any build. But you don't need to have any of the ones such as Tempest Roar or the Werebear ones, or any of like the werewolf form ones. This one is specifically like Lightning God of War version 1, or God of Thunder I should say, version 1. So let's jump into the skill tree and talk about it. First of all, you're going to be taking Storm Strike and then going all the way up until you get Fierce Storm Strike to be able to make enemies vulnerable for 3 seconds. As a 50% chance, this is very good because vulnerable is going to be one of the main things that you use to increase your damage here. But the main skill that we're going to be using is Lightning Storm. When you use Lightning Storm, you will channel it all the way up until 6 of the lightning bolts that go out, and you can keep this active. It's just had a buff for around about 6 seconds before you need to channel it again. And what I would recommend is that you channel it to around about 3 stacks because then you can actually focus down the lightning a little bit more, because what happens, the more lightning that you put out, the wider the spread of the lightning storm actually goes, and it can be a little bit annoying when you're going up against a single target and you kind of going a little bit more RNG sometimes of where your lightning bolts are going to hit. We are all the way going up to Raging Lightning Storm. I don't really recommend Primal Lightning Storm because it's just the chance to hit over the additional lightning strike. That this could definitely be helpful. No additional stuff in here. Then we go into our defensive skills. Number 1, we have Earthen Bulwark here just for Unstoppable. This is going to allow us to create Fortify as well. And then also get out of any CC problems, the same way that we also have Cyclone Armor here to be able to knock enemies back. And this also is very good as well because the passive of it is Powerful Winds Surround You, and you get 10% non-physical damage. And that also goes all the way up until you get a 30% damage as well every 10 seconds that you have Cyclone Armor active. So this is really good for damage reduction as well. We have 3 points in Ancestral Fortitude and 3 points in Vigilance. This is the best for damage reduction. The only problem I'd say with Ancestral Fortitude is the fact that the non-physical resistances is a little bit shady with the way that resistances work in the game. So I may drop points in there and put them somewhere else. We've got no points in our companion tree. And in our Wrath skills, we are using Hurricane for 2 reasons. Number 1, we are using it to create vulnerable, and number 2, to be able to slow enemies as well and do a decent amount of damage anyway. It's not going to be crazy, but it can be helpful to just like finish off certain things. And yeah, it's on a cooldown of 17 seconds. I would recommend as you push higher tiers though that you use a Hurricane that deals enemies that are affected by Hurricane deal 20% less damage over the 15% chance to make enemies vulnerable. I only have 2 points into Endless Tempest, which will extend the duration of Hurricane, but I've messed around with this. You could maybe go with 3 here, and it also helps out with Cataclysm, but you want to have 3 points in Elemental Exposure, 3 points in Charged Atmosphere, 3 points in Electric Shock, and 3 points in Bad Omen. Essentially, this is going to allow you to deal a bunch of lucky hit stuff, 1 for vulnerable, immobilized, and stunned enemies, and then also dealing lightning damage to enemies has a 15% chance to immobilize them. If the target is immobilized, the lightning damage dealt to them is increased by 18%. This is very good. Charged Atmosphere essentially just gives you a random lightning bolt every 12 seconds. This is really fun. Sometimes you'll just see enemies die with damage, which is pretty cool. And then we also have, obviously, Elemental Exposure. This will give you up to a 10% chance to make enemies vulnerable on a lucky hit proc. Into our final area of the tree, we are running Cataclysm. Cataclysm is entirely RNG sometimes. Sometimes it will hit everything that you want it to hit, and then other times it will do nothing. So use it at your will, but because I'm going pure storm here, I would probably mess around with petrify with like earth skills in the future. But yeah, having the additional vulnerable chance with supreme cataclysm can be helpful at times. We have 3 points in defiance, 3 points in circle of life, and 3 points into natural disaster. Your storm skills deal 16% increased damage to basically stun, immobilize, knock back enemies. Circle of life helps you with health, especially when you use magic skill, like nature magic skills. It basically heals us. And then defiance allows our nature magic skills to do increased damage to elites. We also have defensive posture to allow us to get 15% increased fortify, so our earthen bulwark. But also on top of that, nature's resolve, 15% chance when struck to fortify for 4% of your base life. This can be a game changer at times and keep you alive, and then also with one of our aspects help us as well. And then we're going with perfect storm. This allows us to deal a flat 15% damage as well. And you also skills that you cast grant 1 spirit, so you're gaining spirit back as you're casting them. And then also you do additional damage when damaging a vulnerable, immobilized, or slow enemy. You can maybe go with Nature's Fury here for the additional proc, but I'm going with the pure lightning build. Lastly, let's have a quick look at our Paragon boards. The link is fully in the description. I'm just going to go over the glyphs. So we have Exploit here for additional vulnerable damage. We also have Ancestral Guidance for the first board alongside Human for damage reduction. We then took Thunderstruck to give our storm skills increased critical damage against vulnerable or immobilized targets. And then we have Spirit, which is going to allow us to get even more critical damage. And then eventually I'm going to take Constricting Tendrils and then move into this tree and basically get myself additional damage procs from mobilization, that type of thing as well. But this is why it's version 1, because I'm still messing around with the build. And then I'm going to get a bunch of the other nodes as well to be able to increase my damage output. Let's move on to the aspects and some of the gear. First of all, let's run through the aspects before we talk about some stats. First of all, we have the aspect of Cyclonic Force. This allows us to get physical damage reduction when you're using Cyclone Armor, which is very good. It also applies to nearby allies, but that doesn't really affect us here. We also have Disobedience and Protector, because these will keep you alive. One gives you a barrier, absorbing damage, and then the other one basically gives you armor for every time you do damage. And we are going to be standing still quite a bit, doing a lot of damage, so this is going to be helpful. And our gloves, we have Smiting. Now I'm still messing around whether or not I want to keep this, but basically we get increased critical strike chance against injured enemies, and while we are healthy, we gain a 40% increased crowd control duration. So slowed, immobilized, vulnerable. I don't think vulnerable classes, I think it's like a status effect, but I'm not too sure whether or not that counts in here as well. But this is going to be helpful. You can maybe swap this out for something else. On our boots, we have Wind Striker, which allows us critical strikes, gives us a movement speed boost, which is, you know, it's okay. I might swap this out for something when I get into later dungeons, like higher tier dungeons, to see if this is a little bit more beneficial. And our amulet, we have Lightning Dancer's Amulet, which essentially, when we hit critical strikes with Lightning Storm, 3 lightning dancing bolts come out to do additional damage. This is good because obviously on here, on our amulet, it gives us a 50% increase compared to if we had it on our 2-hand, but I'll explain why we have that. We don't have it on our 2-hand. On our rings, we have Retaliation, which allows us to deal additional damage when we have Fortify. This is very good. And then also Rune Walker's Conduit Ring, which is critical strikes with storm skills that you cast in the air, causes a lightning bolt to periodically hit an enemy in the area. So we just got random lightning bolts coming out all over the place with this build, which is kind of fun at times. And then lastly, we have Overcharge, because this is going to give us lucky hit chance up to a 34% chance when dealing lightning damage to overload the target and do additional damage that spreads it out to everybody else as well. Very good. And the reason why I'm going with 2-handed here is because I've not really found a totem that I've quite liked. But yeah, the 2-handed definitely helps. For stats, though, I definitely recommend maximum life, cooldown reduction, healing received, armor on your helmet, chest piece, everything damage reduction. You can get damage reduction against distant enemies, damage reduction against close enemies. If you can get damage while you're in a human form, or like armor, I'm not too sure if you can get life or anything like that, but I have thorns on here which I managed to roll on it, so that can be pretty good to do a bit of additional damage output. Likewise on the legs, it's the same. Armor, damage reduction while fortified, damage reduction versus distant enemies and close enemies. Unfortunately, I've only got willpower on here, so I want to kind of get a better pair of pants in future. On the gauntlets, critical strike chance, critical damage, lucky hit chance, lightning critical strike damage as well, and ranks to lightning storm. All of the additional stats and stuff will be linked in the description with the build, and I've like listed them all off. But yeah, definitely recommend that on there because it increases our lightning storm damage. And our boots, spirit cost reduction, movement speed after killing an elite, and then also if you can get damage reduction while injured. I have these boots here, which are pretty much a god roll in what I'd want, and I'm thinking about re-rolling that poison resistance to see if I can't get myself something better. And it also would probably give me more evade charges, which would be pretty cool as well. On our amulet, damage reduction while injured, anything damage reduction related, any good passive. So I've got natural disaster on here, which is quite helpful. Storm skill damage is quite good as well. But definitely, I think damage reduction is what you're going to need a lot on this build. And then on our rings, lucky hit, critical chance, critical strike damage, lightning critical damage as well, or anything damage to crowd control. Just these are going to be the big ones for you to be able to boost your damage output. And then on the weapon, core skill damage, vulnerable damage, lightning critical strike damage. I think I have in my notes. Just quickly checking. Yes, core skill damage. And then also the thing that's great about this is because it was a two-handed axe, it does 84% increased damage to healthy enemies, which is quite good as well. Oh, look, we have a doggo. But yeah, those are going to be the main stats. And then on the totem, spirit cost reduction, resource generation, cooldown reduction, that type of thing. But I haven't really found a totem that I'm 100% happy with. So with the demonstration on screen behind me, let's just quickly talk about the build. It can be very squishy in certain areas if you don't have that damage resistance, and it's all about your ability to keep the channel of the lightning storm, and then also managing to get crits to proc as well. You also want to make sure that you're always moving as well. If you stand still a little bit too much with this build, sometimes you can get overwhelmed. That's why the cyclone armor is there to help you push enemies back. And also, if you can do a bunch of crit damage and lightning damage to enemies before you even get to them, before they're making their way to you, a lot of things die before they even get a chance to come close. And then you can just run through stuff and even gather things together with your hurricane and slow them all, lightning them, and do a whole bunch of damage. It's a really fun build, and I have played two styles. I've played like the lightning storm with the survivability that I did previously, which was like the shapeshifter build, and then I've also done a pulverize as well, and by far this is the most fun I've had on the Druid so far, and there's a lot of other builds out there to go and try. So yeah, hopefully this video has been helpful and you are able to copy this and enjoy your time using the God of Thunder Lightning Druid. And if you have, make sure you leave a like on the video, subscribe down below as always, and check out the links for the build and the things so you can go and replicate this. But as always, this has been Jimbo, and I'll see you guys next time.